Okay. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. And we're excited to hear from Karol Clark today. She's going to be our speaker. And the topic, as you can see on the screen, is how to maintain a productive working environment from your home. And as you remember, when we met as a marketing committee, we were talking about topics for this year. We tried to coordinate these topics based on what was going on in our culture. Little did we know that we would be up and down as we have been recently, but we knew that some people were going to be working from home because of the COVID. And in that same respect, we knew some of those people probably wouldn't come back to the office based on the company's decision to realize, hey, it works better to have them at home and we don't need to create the extra office expense. So some of these businesses will probably never return to the office. So we thought this topic would be germane to what we were going through in today's environment. So our guest speaker, Karol Clark, let me give you a short bio on her. Karol is a best-selling author, a business consultant, a speaker, a podcaster, an entrepreneur who manages the Center for Weight Loss Success and Center for Hormone Health and Wellness in Newport News, Virginia. She also has a passion for helping weight loss physicians across the U.S. integrate effective weight loss services and retail sales into their practice while improving patient outcomes and enjoying the journey along the way. With over 20 years of experience managing both on-site and remote teams while maintaining high performance and low turnover, she is ideal to present our topic today. And you definitely will be interested in hear what she has to say. And so we're eager to turn this program over to Karol Clark.
Oh, gosh, thanks, Raymond. I am going to dive right in because there's a lot to cover, but I don't mind if someone has a question along the way to be interrupted. Just let me know if something pops up. And otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and get started and dive right in. And let me just get my slide to move. Sorry. Before I start, I just wanted to thank you, Raymond, for inviting me to present today. And I wanted to thank everyone as a part of this group. I know it's been a challenging year for all of us. I am a business owner, my husband and I, here in Newport News. And so I really get that. And then I work with practices across the US. So I've seen so many different impacts. But there are, as we all know, ways to turn it into something positive. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And I was just going to tell you a little bit of a story. Sorry, as my slides, I'm so sorry. Okay. The webinar objectives for today we're going to go through is really to clarify the current employment statistics and the predicted trends as it relates to working from home. Talk a little bit about the benefits and frustrations. Anyone who's been a part of this knows that there are benefits and frustrations to that. Outline the best practices for attaining and maintaining optimal productivity, which sometimes ends up being a little bit of trial and error for people as they get things set out at home or wherever they're going to be working. And then talk about some top strategies for effectively managing teams, because a lot of us may have some trust issues around that, and how to make sure that you're getting the outcome that you want. And then some top tips for just setting you and your team up for success. Just a little story about myself. I know Raymond shared some of the background about myself, but this is probably almost 20 years ago, and this is my husband and I. I think I just had our fourth child, and as entrepreneurs, we were opening up a brand new practice here in Newport News. My background, I am a nurse, but I had always worked in the healthcare setting in women's health as and NICU and all that sort of thing. And so this was a new endeavor. So for anyone who has become an entrepreneur, you really take a lot of different chances. But we just continued, like most people do, to plug along and really just try to keep the patient as the primary focus and positive outcomes. And it's amazing what happens over time. Over time, we were able to build a new practice here in Newport News. We're next door to Harpoon Larry's, if you know where that is. So we have a comprehensive center here, and we do medical weight loss, surgical weight loss, fitness, nutrition, everything sort of under one roof. But we have been impacted. Our fitness center is still closed, so we have had to adjust. We were blessed. We did have to do some furlough of employees, or we'll actually reduce hours, but as a blessing, we've had a team that's been with us for a long time. Everyone came back last July, so that's been very fortunate. I know not everyone has had that sort of blessing, but really there are some key things that help with that. And then I do actually, you might think in the medical field, nobody really works from home, but I actually work 3 days from home, 2 days here at the office. The team is great. They manage the day-to-day, and I actually spend most of my time consulting with other practices and businesses across the U.S. and helping them as they transition into some of these hybrid models, and also, just adjusting to everything with the pandemic. I have for a long time. I love working with physicians and working on their social media campaigns, doing things in a very cost-effective way, having organic reach, and I love, podcasting, so many different things, publishing, and it's really a lot of fun. So over the years, we ended up having people come and say, how can we duplicate this model? So I thought, well, why not help people do just that? So I opened Weight Loss Practice Builder, and that's what I spend a lot of time doing. But it is something that is happening somewhat in the medical field as well, in terms of people working from home, and it can be effective if done, really well. So that's what we're going to focus on. And I just want to say it is really great to be here today. I appreciate your time being here as well. The reality is that the pandemic triggered basically a decade's worth of changes for the industry, and they are literally here to stay. So that's what we are seeing, and it is something that has, let me just pull this back, sorry. It is a matter of months, and likely things will never be the same for any of us. So we have to get used to that and make the most of it. And I know we were able to actually pivot and make some really positive changes and help other practices do the same. So it is something that's really helpful. I wanted to touch a little bit on current unemployment statistics, specifically for the state of Virginia, because that does play into what we're talking about today. And really in the state of Virginia, our unemployment rate currently is 4.3%. We have had a historic high back in April of last year, 11.3. Many of us felt that, experienced it firsthand, of course. And our historic low was in November of 2000, which was 2.1%. In the US, we're actually ranked 17th in terms of our unemployment rate, along with Missouri, and the state with the lowest unemployment rate is actually Nebraska at 2.5%, and the highest is New Mexico and Connecticut. I just find that interesting. So our unemployment rate is actually, coming down. We are experiencing that, but yet we still have other struggles. The job openings in the state of in the U.S. are actually going up, and so what we're seeing is more job openings as people are opening up, even though we are experiencing this current change in terms of the Delta variant. I know I work with a number of surgical practices in other states that are actually shut down again. They're not able to do any elective cases, nothing unless it's emergent. So it is really hitting hard, particularly practices I work with in Florida and some of the other areas out in California and that sort of thing. So job openings, though, are going up. So it's interesting. You see job openings going up, you see the unemployment rate starting to come down, but there are some caveats to this. So when this is happening, what does it mean for you as the employer or as the employee? Actually, employers in Virginia have recovered about 58% of the roughly 480,000 jobs that were lost last year during the pandemic. So that's actually really great. But what is happening is that currently we're experiencing a slowdown in the jobs recovery. So you can see where we have more jobs available. Any one of us can see this, in particularly in some industries. You may go to a restaurant if you're able to do that and you don't have any work staff, they're limiting hours. So for the employer, you have more jobs, but we also understand that the minimum wage has just gone up, which is good for employees. We want to make sure that we treat our employees extremely well, but it's making it hard to find the talent that you want for your particular job. So for the employer, there are some definite struggles with this. I'm blessed that we have all of our positions filled and we're able to continue to operate at the moment. So that is good. This is not the case for everybody, but for the employee, many of them are still, as you know, staying out of the workforce primarily because they have some COVID worries. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but there are other reasons that sometimes have been used as a reason for that. Also, sometimes they've actually been home. They're realizing that they're trying to find a job. They want one that matches their skills. They are also, being a little bit more selective, and there's a challenge between employers and employees in finding the exact right fit for that. And particularly when you have people working from home, you need to be very careful about who it is that you're hiring, make sure that your hiring practices support somebody at home, that you're able to support them in the proper way so they can do the job that they need to do. But there are definitely struggles here. In addition, for the employer, besides having, particularly for small businesses, it's hard to afford some of the things that you need to do in order to attract talent. The cost of raw materials has gone up, which is causing some of the inflation that we're seeing. There are just so many variables that play into this entire situation that we're all experiencing right now. The bottom line, though, is that here's the current average work location that we're seeing. So based on a study done by Gartner Incorporated, about 40%, if you look across all industries, about 40% of the workforce right now is fully remote, about 37% is fully in office, and about 23% is a hybrid mix of this. Now, granted, there are some, if you're working in a hospital, obviously people at the bedside can't be working remotely, although we do have some telehealth and all that sort of thing going on. But if you look across all industries, this is what is being shown. This is back in September of 2020. And when I looked at current statistics, it was very similar. And so this is what people are doing right now, and it has required us to change how we do things. And in many cases, I like to think for the better. There are predicted trends right now. The predicted trends is that this hybrid model is likely going to emerge, and it's going to have work from home arrangement in many industries. The other predicted trend is that technology, connectivity, and security of data, which are big concerns for all of us, will continue to be critical in order for that work at home situation to be successful. The other thing is that the nature of your work will play into your ability to work from home, although we are all getting used to some of the more remote things, and many of us are liking that. So we are looking for jobs that serve us well, serve the employer well, but the nature of work will definitely play into that. And I think that another predicted trend is that this is not different necessarily from someone who works at your work setting right on site, but trust is really important on all levels in order to make this successful. You have to trust your employees. They need to be able to trust you in terms of your predictions, your outlook, your vision for your business. They also trust with leadership is important. Making sure that you are leading this team, particularly when they're remote, this becomes extremely important. Safety for your team, this is a concern, when it comes to just COVID and also just the safety of data and information. Team building is even more important. I think it's important no matter where you're working, but your team has to feel included. They have to have a sense of connection. Making sure that you have clear expectations can be the difference of success and failure for sure. You have to have respected boundaries and a high level of communication. All these things are going to be critical to success for anyone who's working remotely, especially. And then these also translate into the workplace setting as well. So these are the workplace trends. If you look at the statistics that you see right now from the PricewaterhouseCoopers, the PwC, they have found that 55% of employees prefer working remotely at least 3 days a week. So when we get into this hybrid model that's predicted for the future, or as we continue, that's what they're finding. And yet 68% of executives think that employees should be in the office at least 3 days per week to maintain a strong company culture. So there is a little bit of a difference there, but definitely a hybrid model is in the vision for employees as well as employers in terms of the future of remote working. There is another study that was done by Gartner that talked about if you gave a work preference after coronavirus to the employees, what did they say? And for 27% of them said, yeah, I want to work from home every day. 34%, as you can see, the greatest one, wants to have sort of a hybrid model. And so that's the bulk of them, between 3 to 4 times a week and 1 to 2 times a week. And there are so many things that play into that, which we're going to get into. Several times a month, less than several times a month, and never really was only 3% of the employees that were asked this question. So definitely a hybrid model is going to be in effect for many of the different industries. Let's get into a little bit about the benefits of working from home. And a lot of times this is something that if you're working from home, some of these can be a double-edged sword. It can be a benefit, but it can also be something that can be a frustration for you. So the number one, especially in a lot of large cities, is the time that's saved with less commuting. That's a great thing. It's less time commuting, so you actually have more time to either do a morning routine that promotes health for yourself. You can alter your work hours. You can sleep in a little bit longer, so you save time and you use that however it's best served for you, making sure that you're meeting the requirements of your job. Now, many of us, when I commute, I'm a big Audible book person, so I maximize my commute time by listening to podcasts, the news, or my favorite music, so you can see where people maybe had benefit with that commute, but the majority of them really do like the fact that they're saving a huge amount of time, and they're less likely to have automobile accidents. They're less likely to, be late for things. It's just one of those things that you save that time. The other benefit is location independence, meaning that working from home allows you to work in a broader range of job opportunities that aren't limited by your geographic location, perhaps. And the independence is particularly beneficial for people who live in rural areas, those that perhaps are military spouses and move around a lot. Being able to work from home is very helpful for that. It helps for those people who are perhaps in smaller towns and don't want to live in a larger city. And it also avoids sometimes people having to live in those areas that are higher cost. So location independence can be a great thing. Improved inclusivity is another big thing for companies in terms of a benefit. The companies with remote workers, you can embrace diversity easier and inclusion because it's easier to hire people from different geographic areas, different socioeconomic areas, and different cultural backgrounds. I am a big proponent of having diversity in the workplace. It just makes, although I love it because there's so many different viewpoints. There are times when your meetings are just so much more insightful, and you can basically address so many different things rather than having groupthink or just having everyone with the same skill set and the same mindset. I really love having inclusive and diverse workplace. I find it to be very helpful in terms of creativity and just coming up with great ways to manage any issues that come up along the way. The other thing about inclusivity is that when people are working from home, you can also hire some people with disabilities who perhaps have difficulty coming into the workplace, and also those that care for children or the elderly or someone at home, because they can have a more flexible schedule. So you can tap into those talents and include them in your workforce. And it can be a really great thing. The other thing is a lower carbon footprint. We are not driving places. I'm not an expert in this area, but according to carbonfootprint.com, you can actually save so much in terms of the emissions over your career and really lower your carbon footprint. I know my kids, any of you who have children out there, are very into this, and I'm learning more about it every day and trying to do my part, but it can be something that can be very helpful in terms of a benefit. The flexibility is something that is wonderful, depending on your required daily schedule for your job. Working from home affords you the opportunity to go do things perhaps that can be done during less peak time or off-peak times in terms of some doctor's appointments. And it all depends on what type of job you have and what your hours are required to be. Obviously, if you're employed, that has to be a priority for you, but you typically can have increased flexibility working from home. Also a big financial savings in terms of your cost for gas, car maintenance, transportation, parking fees, your professional wardrobe, although we still want to make sure that we are professional when we are on our meetings, and also the money spent on lunches out. There's actually been some studies shown that employees, a company can save actually $11,000 per year for every employee. So it can be moved into many dollars, particularly as people are downsizing their actual physical space, doing more shared workspace. There are some definite financial savings for both the employee and the employer. The less distractions is one of those that I think can really be a double-edged sword. So even though I have 4 children, but I am currently just took my last one to college last week, and so I'm an empty nester right now, but there are tons of distractions depending on your personality and what's going on at home that you really have to take control of. But typically you can have less distractions at home, particularly if you put the boundaries in place that need to be there. You have an opportunity for personalized and creative office space, as I think it's males and females alike. If you have a space that really is something that you enjoy, you more willingly go there. You can actually be much more creative, and that for me specifically does increase my productivity when my space is something that brings me joy and brings me calm and brings me organization. It really does help me be productive. And it's often easier to eat healthier and get exercise at home. I know we have patients here who definitely gained weight throughout COVID, but there are plenty of other ones that took that opportunity to really dial in their eating, limit what it is they have at home, and take that lunchtime and get exercise right away and work it into their day versus avoiding it. And it also gives you more family time because you do have less of a commute. So the benefits are definitely there for working from home. Obviously, there are some frustrations. I struggle with a lot of these. The first one is temptation to overwork. You're there. It's hard to separate work and your personal life, particularly depending on where you put your office at home. So you do have this temptation to always be looking at your work and being a part of that. So home has always been thought of as a refuge. It's sort of where you go when you're away from it all. Your commute might have been your divide between work and home, and you kind of turned off work and turned on your home life. And if you don't have that clear division anymore, it can be very difficult. So some of the things you can do to overcome that, because we want to really get into what to do about it, is to really, first you can create a work location that's physically separate from the rest of your home if you're blessed with that ability. So you can make sure you have a home office, whether it's a closet that you turn into a home office, a separate room that you may have available, whether it's something that you turn into a back shed that you have as a man cave, or a place for you to go as a female to work. So there's lots of different creative spaces that you can use for that. So you want to take a look at that. I say look at that workspace, discuss it with your family, create it as you want, and then but be creative. So that will help with that temptation to overwork. Also, you may have to pay for a co-working space, or your employer may, if that's more helpful, because your home life is just so there's children and lots of other responsibilities there. Carefully schedule your day. This is a really big one, with a start time and an end time, and stick to it. This takes a lot of practice. Use an alarm if you need to. I have a huge issue with this. I will find myself looking at my emails, doing work late at night, sending things back to clients, and I really have to stop myself from doing that. Make sure that you don't work outside your office. So if you set up an office, do all of your work in that office. Don't be doing your work additionally in your bedroom or at the kitchen table or something like that. Keep your work to your office, set a start and end time. That will really help with your temptation to overwork. The other thing you can do is turn off or put your electronics, like your phone, on Do Not Disturb during family and spouse time, and you can actually have everyone do that. Put them all in a basket during dinner time. We all need to have a bit of a disconnect from technology in order to be able to not overwork. If it's sitting there, it's so tempting. I don't know how many people get up in the morning, the first thing to do is look at their phone. It's the worst thing you can do when you get up. It increases your anxiety, your stress level. It's best to get up, and if you can set up a morning routine that involves, depending on what you have going on. I know if you have to get up earlier, that may be the case, but sometime to have time for yourself, meditate a little bit, do your fitness if you can, and really take time for yourself before you dive into your electronics and your work. The other thing is basically setting really clear boundaries with those that you work with, when you're going to be answering your emails, what your work hours are, and any scheduled time off for vacation or appointments. I work on this with clients all the time, and we do it here at our practice too. It's one of those things where you can train those that you work with and those that you serve by knowing what your boundaries are. And most people will respect that, but you do have to sort of be strict about that. But those are some ways that you can elude the temptation to overwork. The next thing is lack of proper technology, connectivity, and training. This is more of an employer situation. We need to make sure our employees have the proper technology that they use, some connectivity, and the training to use the tools that you've decided to use. This also plays into your security and your IT situation, but we want to make sure that this is one of the biggest factors to low productivity, is not having the proper technology. So it becomes an excuse to not work that day or to not put that time in. So if you have that set up properly, it can be a huge difference between people being able to be productive and not be productive. The other frustration can be less human interaction with your team. We're all social beings on some level. Even if you're an introvert, we all crave some human interaction. So this can be a huge deterrent to productivity and also just to enjoyment of working from home or having a hybrid model. With COVID, human interaction is limited to small groups, we social distance, but you can overcome some of this with video calls. That's not exactly the same thing, but it really does help. We found that with our families and friends and extended family, being able to converse with them. Sometimes it just helps to hear their voice, hear laughter, and have conversations and be able to see their face. Consider some time, outside. This helps to expand interaction. You can social distance while you're out taking a walk. It also makes you feel better. And if isolation is a big problem for you, you may want to consider co-working space, and that arrangement may be a better opportunity for you. The other thing is when you're having your meetings, plan some fun meetings with your team. Start it out with a little bit of an icebreaker. At the end, let people stay on to have a conversation. They're not having that time at work to talk together, so integrating that human interaction and even some games on a Friday afternoon or some sort of a virtual happy hour, something like that can be really helpful to decrease the that frustration of less human interaction. The other struggle is difficulty finding your home office space, where to be. The best situated at home workers move into like an office there, but we don't all have that luxury. So you want to examine the options, like I mentioned earlier, in your house for your private office. Hold a family meeting, talk about the options that you've come up with, brainstorm that a bit, and then set it up and stick with it. Like I say, it can be an outside man cave or a she shed, they call them nowadays, if that's what you need to do. But if you can't come up with a viable option, then you may want to look at considering renting space somewhere else or utilizing some co-working space. That can be another thing you can do. The other thing, loneliness or social isolation, is another one that kind of lends into the less human interaction with your team. For that, you want to make sure that you are connecting with them and making sure that you have that connection will increase their productivity and their sense of satisfaction. Less networking is something that's a disadvantage, because when you're networking, that's how we grow at work, that's how we advance at work, and this has become a really big issue nationwide in terms of there's less networking, so you really decrease some of your opportunity for advancement, and it can be a big deterrent. So in order to increase that, you want to make sure that you are reaching out on a regular basis. You want to over communicate with those that you report to and those people that work for you. You want to make sure that you are getting some of that networking in. You can even schedule some group networking and also starting back to some of the meetings like this group here. This is networking. This is how we find new opportunities. This is how we find new ways of doing things. So getting back to that, and the fact that you've continued your meetings all along is something that is really important, because that networking is important for all of us from a personal and professional perspective. Potential distractions is a huge one. You walk by, I don't know how you are, but I can get a little obsessive compulsive about, dirty dishes and having the laundry done and just making sure that things are tidy. We all have we all have our own quirks. So you have to sort of separate that and make sure that you set clear boundaries for your family if you're working from home and you have little children, even with animals. So you may have to bring someone into your home to help care for your children during your work hours, whatever you have to do. But we do need to set up a way to eliminate or minimize the distractions as much as we can so we can be productive. The other thing is sometimes there's a need for structured food and fitness routine. This is what makes us feel better. Our productivity is better when we feel healthier, when we do have fitness as a part of a routine, but it's often the first thing that we take out when we get stressed. We eat comfort foods. We feel like we don't have time for fitness, but once we get back into it, you're like, why did I ever stop that? So you need to structure that and work it into your day and share that with your boss in terms of when you're going to be doing that, and make sure that you do have it worked into your day. It is so important for your physical and mental health. And also there's a potential for miscommunication. You know how it is when you're meeting with someone face to face, you can read their body language, you can kind of really eliminate some of the misinterpretations from what people are saying. When you're just texting or writing, the miscommunication can be really overwhelming, and we oftentimes can have our minds go into a downward spiral, thinking that something's going on that's not really going on. So there is this potential for miscommunication. The way to overcome that is to make sure that you literally over communicate. So after you have a meeting, putting everything in writing. When you write things, if you think there's sort of a miscommunication, or you think it needs, then you need to schedule a face-to-face video or video meeting about that, so you can actually have a certain degree of that. But the potential for miscommunication is huge, and you want to avoid that at all costs. It creates a severe drop in productivity, in job satisfaction, and so that miscommunication, so it may involve another way to avoid this is just on Monday mornings, you have this, a quick meeting with everyone on your team. You go through what happened last week, what's going on this week, what do you need help with, and it doesn't have to be a long meeting, but it's something that you want to make sure that you're doing every single week, and that you are reaching out individually to all of your employees to make sure that they are on board, they understand what the expectations are, and that they are feeling as if they're included. And the last thing is one of the biggest things related to productivity is unclear performance metrics. As employers or managers, we sometimes fear people working from home because you have this vision of like, they're not really working at all. And at work, at least you can see them. But there has to be a certain degree of trust. And one of the best ways to manage this is to provide clear performance metrics and measure them. And I recommend every single week. I know for the people I have working some hours from home, they really appreciate the fact that we go through sort of a to-do list, or we go through, and I don't necessarily give tasks as much anymore as what I used to be a big micromanager. I've avoided that, and it's really been liberating for me and for the team. They are so much happier, and so am I. I give outcomes. So I give what the goal is for this week. I give an outcome in terms of a process that I want created. I give an outcome for a social media campaign. Whatever my outcome is, I'll help them along the way, but I give them the outcome, and then I measure that every single week. So for example, on Sundays, I send a little outcome measurement and some tasks or to-do lists to my my main person who works at home. She loves it. Of course, she's a list person, but she loves getting that every week. If I don't send it to her, she's asking for it. So it's one of those things, if you just set it up as part of your expectations, it will really help with performance issues, and it'll also help with that productivity. And some companies have opted to do some work at home agreements, and so they put everything in writing. I think this can be really helpful. It depends obviously on the team member that you have, or the position or the responsibilities that they have, but it's certainly a way to put everything into writing. There are some other examples of these such contracts. There's a book that is helpful, that can be helpful for you, and I went through it, and they actually have some samples throughout there, but it's called Work Together Anywhere, and if you look that up, it's by Lizette Sutherland. She has some different samples of some of those sort of contracts that you can create, or agreements that you can create with your team members. It really helps then, if you do have someone who's not performing, being able to work towards adjusting that. So these are some of the biggest frustrations, some of the most common things to do about it. You may also have other suggestions that we can talk about, but these are the most common frustrations. So in terms of best practices, and I not only did a lot of research on this, but I also, looked at what are the best practices that I see working here and with all the different businesses that I work with. But here, some of the best practices for optimal productivity. First is, and we talked about some of these, but strictly manage your schedule and your time. If you are not a structured person, it's one of those things that you have got to sort of create. So some jobs you can request that you work certain hours in the morning and certain hours in the evening. You may have set hours that you have to work, but a little bit of flexibility can go a long way in terms of job satisfaction. But personally, you have got to manage your schedule and your time. For me, I like to schedule my priorities as well. And of course, you're going to get some interruptions, but this is something that is really important. When you strictly manage your schedule and your time, that means that you not only know what that is, but those that are in your household know exactly what your schedule is and when you're available, when you're not available, in addition to your colleagues and that sort of thing, and those that you are serving. The other thing that is huge, it makes a big difference in everyone. Many people, they just get overwhelmed and they don't do it, is to have a morning routine that sets you up for success. For me, I know I have 4 kids. When they were little at home, I had to get up early in order to do this. Now now that I'm more of an empty nester, it's not as difficult, but waking up in the morning, not touching your phone, and get up, brush your teeth, have a big glass of water, go downstairs, do your reading, whether it's something faith-based or a little meditation, getting some at least stretching or a walk or some sort of fitness in, and also just reviewing your day, going up, getting yourself ready, and then you just start with a much clearer mindset. And so having a morning routine that serves you, I have a morning routine that I can make last an hour, or I can cut it back to 15 minutes, depending on the time that I have. So your morning routine is really important to getting your mind and your body ready for a great day. And whether it's affirmations that you're using, journaling, reading the Bible, whatever it is, you want to set yourself up for success for the day. This has a big impact on your productivity. I've done talks for women's groups, lots of different on morning routine alone, and it is something that really, once you get it going, it is just very impactful. The other thing is to strategically create your workspace. For me, I like to have sort of an L-shaped desk. I have to have room to spread out. We all work in different ways. I respect that for all of my team members. Some are list-driven, some have to have everything laid out, some are sticky note people. It just depends, but strategically create your workspace and make sure it's something that works for you. And everybody is a little bit different. So I would take the time to do that. Once you do that, it makes working from home so much better. The other thing, the boundaries, once again, setting strict boundaries for work and home. So making sure that everyone knows that. I mention it more than once because it's that important. Boundaries are one of the things that can really get us into trouble if they're not in place. The other thing is you definitely want to over communicate. For me, there are lots of different ways that I do this with different practices that I work with or different businesses. Here in our on-site, we do a sort of a weekly meeting. I meet with my team. We talk about what happened last week, what's going on this week. We set our goals for the week. Does anyone need help with something? We move forward. Sometimes we may not be necessarily every week, but it is a regular communication. You can do that, like I say, face-to-face. You can do it via Zoom, something like that. I also utilize some tools. There are various tools out there that you can set up. I use Trello, there's Monday.com, there is Zoom, there's Todoist. There are many different tools out there where you can actually create sort of boards for projects you're working on, who's assigned something, who is responsible for that, the date for completion. I do this doing blueprints for businesses all the time. I can do it in a spreadsheet or a Trello board, wherever they want to utilize. But you want to make sure that you over communicate, make sure that you've got set responsibilities, deadlines, and what you want to have accomplished. The other thing is to make some time for face-to-face team interactions. In person is best, but at least via Zoom if you are totally remote. For most of us, we're hybrids, so you do want to make time for that. It is so important for team building and just for people to feel included, and you want to make sure that you do that. The other thing I do is I do this may sound like a fluffy thing, but I do an inspirational quote each week that I share with my team members. I leave them notes frequently about all the good things that they're doing. I leave them, lots of little cards, things like that. We celebrate, whether it's virtually or on site, their birthdays, their anniversary dates. They really feel included, and that's probably part, number one, I enjoy it. Number two, they enjoy it, and it's probably a good way to build longevity into your team, which of course saves you money over time time because you're not always retraining people. I know I think the minimum someone's been here is 8 years, the maximum's 21 years, and it's something that they value. So making time for that is really important. Clarify performance metrics, review them often. I've reviewed that numerous times, and then identify, for me, I have to identify my top 3 priorities for the day and do those first. So it's sort of like Eat That Frog, if you're familiar with that book, those sorts of things. Identify your priorities, do those first, and then that way you don't get derailed as much throughout the day when you have little fires to be putting out or big fires to be putting out. Try to arrive to your meetings ahead of time. Because, you know, ahead of time is on time is sometimes late, we view that, but you do want to be there, especially if you're an employee or an employer, you want to be there. Maintain your professionalism, so you're not wearing your pajamas or something like that. You want to make sure you maintain your professionalism, and then also a blend of your personality. For me, I share my personality a lot here, and maybe not everyone appreciates it, but I want to know the personality of my team, and I want everyone to be able to be real and transparent with each other as much as possible. So those are some guidelines for best practices for making productivity at home at a higher level, also for longevity, and it can just really help in terms of every aspect. And these are important whether you're working remotely, 100% hybrid, or on site. Finally, when you're managing your team, I want to get to this and then we'll open it up for questions so we can stay on time. But when you're managing remote team members, there are a lot of other good practices. First of all, for many of us, and I had to do this myself, evaluate how you feel about remote working first and understand why. Many of us are distrustful about this situation, and in all honesty, if you have an employee on site who has difficulty staying on task and doing their job and is distracted easily and perhaps is not performing at an optimal level, they're not going to be the best person to be working remotely. And there's probably a good reason for you to, to make sure that you do have sort of some of that misgiving. But you do have to evaluate how you feel, document that, kind of work through those feelings and talk about it with leadership and move forward from there. Give yourself and your team some grace. This is new territory for many, so I do encourage you to assume the best in people and expect that, and oftentimes that's exactly what you get, instead of like worrying about everything and thinking things that are not actually occurring. So you want to give some grace here and work through it transparently. Always be open with your communication. Commit to providing strong, empathic, flexible leadership. That's important whether it's on site or with teams, and make sure your team has the tools they need. We talked about that earlier, that they have their computer, their connectivity. That's going to be very important, and provide them with tool training. If you decide to use Monday.com or Trello or any of the other Teams programs, you want to make sure that they are trained properly in that. And consider adding remote-friendly tools like I just mentioned. The other thing is to over-communicate your goals and expectations, and you can consider a team agreement if you want. And like I mentioned, assume the best, not the worst, and always, be transparent about what's going on and the struggles people are experiencing. That's how you work through frustrations, and that's how you make things better. Check in regularly and ask questions. Make sure that you are monitoring your team members and making sure, asking them how they're feeling. I have a list of questions that I like to include for people, what they're liking the most, what they're liking the least, suggestions from them for how to improve things. Make sure that if asking them if there's something else they need that could help with their productivity, making sure that they feel valued, and schedule regular meetings with them. So you want to do that regularly. In terms of running effective meetings, this is a whole presentation on its own, but you do want to make sure that when you have your meetings and you're running them, that they are effective and that you are keeping things on task. You're not letting meetings run on or someone overtaking the meeting. Have some icebreakers perhaps at the beginning if you want or need to for that connectivity with your team, but make sure that you have an agenda and that you're following through on that, and that you're leaving, everyone knows what the purpose of the meeting is, rather just meeting for the sake of meeting. And you do want to humanize the experience. We talked about that. Trust is so important on all levels. And then continually strengthen your relationship with your team members. Those are some of the best ways to manage remote team members and have this be a very successful and enjoyable model, because we all spend a lot of time at work. We all spend a lot of time with our coworkers, and it should be something that you're thoroughly enjoying versus something that you dread each and every day. So the bottom line, you need trust, open communication, and clear expectations. That's really important. Not everyone's a good fit for working from home. And so you have to make sure that you utilize this when you're hiring people and also when you're selecting those that are going to be working from home. And then also make sure that your on-site leadership principles, they also apply to work from home and hybrid situations. So to take those and utilize those in home situations as well. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. I know I went through that a little bit quickly, but I know that we like to keep on schedule, like our best team meeting situations. So if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.